Hi, welcome to Wall Street Hackers, one of the most popular shows on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito, will not be your host today. Instead, we're going to bring in the hacker himself, who will be discussing, of course, the markets, the quote of the week, stories of the weeks about the market, and of course, Peter's picks and a panel discussion, all in the next 30 minutes. Graduate of UCLA, he received his bachelor's degree in economics and then his law degree at the University of Miami, who will be playing for the national championship. Then went to NYU for his degree and his MBA, and then spent 17 years on Wall Street, studying and analyzing what we're going to look at today, which is the stock market. So with that, none other than the hacker himself, Peter Bennett. So
Hey,
Peter, take it away. Let us know what this market's doing and what we should be doing.
Very good. It's always a challenge. You're on, I'm off right now in the middle there. There you go. Thank you. So welcome to Wall Street Hackers, January 13th, 2026. You'll have to excuse the background here. It's temporary. You can catch a new episode most weeks starting at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'll also apologize for last week because we had an unexpected thing come up, and I had said that we'd be back on this week. We've been on for years, and all shows tend to lapse, take a break. So we took a break. We're back. We'll be on for at least the next few weeks consecutively with our picks and all the other information we provide. So first, we always start off with the quotes of the week, which relate to the market report of the week. The December job report showed unemployment falling to 4.4% and 50,000 added. This is from Jack Bowman, January 9th, 2026. The problem with this is the revisions were in prior months were negative. So there was actually a 3-month job loss. And that is highlighting labor market volatility. Job gains, for those interested, were mainly in healthcare, where there's going to continually be job gains, and hospitality, construction, and manufacturing continue to shed jobs, raising concerns about the economic breadth. This is from Damir Tokic, January 11th, 2026. Falling rents are providing a disinflationary effect on service inflation. And however, this is a sign of a weakening housing market, not surprising with mortgage rates so high. Also, he says the full impact of tariffs will be felt in Q1 2026 as low levels of inventory are rebuilt, pushing good inflation higher and shrinking corporate profit margins. Now, I am definitely in favor of tariffs because in the long run, it's equalizing the trading between the countries around the world, many have been basically ripping us off for years, unfair practices, one-way practices. But the other side is there will be an effect, and it was kind of delayed because the companies built up a lot of inventory, but now it's going to put more inflationary pressure on yet a somewhat slowing economy in some ways, and in other places not. So here's the other side of this. Peter Navarro, the senior White House counselor for trade and manufacturing, scheduled, I'm sorry, I'm a little flustered by the background. I'm working on that. Okay, there you go. That's a little better. We'll work with that side view. Peter Navarro, the senior White House counselor for trade and manufacturing, credited Donald Trump's tariffs, tax policy, and energy policy agenda for a sharp change in economic momentum, a very positive change. The Atlanta Fed is now predicting estimated 5.4% GDP growth in for the fourth quarter of 25. It's not in yet, but that's huge growth. I mean, we had 2% growth during the Biden administration. So these are different forces, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But So here's really the point. This is from Barron's Daily, 12/31. How a divided Fed could define the S&P 526. Interest rate cuts from the Federal Reserve and optimism over AI have helped the market go higher in 25. Obviously, a divided and changing Fed may complicate 2026. Sentiment at the Fed seems as mixed as the economy itself, which shows signs of both surprising strength through growth, but there are inflation risks and weaknesses such as the cooling labor market. So this is kind of the most mixed report we've had in years. Although we had a lot of negative reports that were clearly negative in the prior administration, now we're getting these mixed signals. How could that be? Well, on one side, President Trump's growth policies are kicking in. He's reduced the cost of energy. He's cutting regulation. These are all positives. And rents are coming down. And some argue, although that's not convincing, that it might be because of outmigration. If millions of people are outmigrating, and millions have, that could reduce rent pressures, at least in certain sectors. On the other side, the labor market is tending to show definite sign of weakness, and that could be a number of signs in causes too. But one is AI might be starting to impact and take some jobs away. And I've been negative on AI because I think it's overhyped in the short run, and there's a lot of issues there. We've discussed that over the last year, mainly in the last few months, because that's when it got overhyped. And that's a complicated subject, but there's a really complicated subject in terms of accelerated slowing, reduced depreciation by a lot of these hyperscalers. This is a complicated subject, but the point is there might be an AI bust for a while there. But the other thing is, I'm more and more impressed with some of the things AI is doing. And unfortunately, that may pressure jobs, but that itself would, again, be complicated because now we're talking about increased productivity from companies, but pressure maybe from consumers. So the final thing that is the elephant in the room, and we talk about this for years, the massive U.S. deficit, which is $125 trillion estimated. Everybody's concerned about the 38 trillion, and we've watched it go to 36, 37, 38. It keeps climbing. But the point is, there's off the books debt for Social Security and Medicare, and these funds are going to run out in 2033, and that's not so far away. When these funds run out, there's going to be a cliff, because basically the money that was in the funds is going to have to be printed immediately, or they're going to have to massively cut the funds. I don't think anybody's going to cut Medicare a lot, because that would be political suicide. And even Social Security, maybe there'll be cuts. There's different forms of that. But the bottom line is that every year, because of these massive deficits, that was developed for 50 years. They've been kicking the can down the road. Democrats, Republicans, different presidents. This is a massive, unbelievably large amount of money. 125 trillion is more than the U.S. stock market, the U.S. bond market, and all privately held real estate in the United States and commercial real estate. So you go, wait a minute, that's everything. And this is 7 years from now, and these funds are going to start, they will run bankrupt around 2033. So now you might say, okay, I'll move my investments overseas because this is where it's going to be great. The problem is these countries are probably all in worse shape. I've looked at many of these countries. They have underfunded pensions similar to the U.S., partly funded. But the thing is, they've promised mostly free medical care, in at least one or two cases, free medical care for aging populations. And they probably haven't put anything away for these funds, almost all these countries, I'll say, because I know maybe one has. But the point is, where do you hide? And also the bottom line. So here's the two bottom lines for the investor. One, the overall market is likely to see gains in the future, but they're going to be nominal gains, because what's happening is you'll have to measure your gains against inflation. So if inflation's 4 or 5 and the market's going up maybe 3 to 6, which is what a lot of the firms, including Goldman and JP Morgan, have predicted, you're not really gaining a lot. It's a tough market. But for Wall Street hackers, I say we're not as concerned. Why? Because we're bottom-up stock pickers, and we're looking for businesses, basically investments that generate income. Most of our investments are oriented towards generating cash flow, but we're also looking at stocks, REITs, and MLPs that generate income, which is going to be more and more important for the consumer and everybody in the future for reinvestment, for living, and all those other things. But also we look for very high cash flows, which means the dividends are safer, that there could be potential growth, also defensive sectors and defensive balance sheets. So we are not looking at the macroeconomic environment and panicking. We're just saying it's a really hard environment to pick winners in. It used to be a lot easier. Moving on. So the most interesting story of the week is really a pretty surprising story. It was covered by many news outlets, probably, but other people may not know at all about it. So the U.S. used a powerful mystery weapon that brought Venezuelan soldiers to their knees during the daring raid to capture Nicolas Maduro. In a jaw-dropping interview, a Venezuelan security guard described how American forces wiped out hundreds of fighters without losing a single soldier. There were no casualties on the U.S. side, and hundreds of Venezuelans were overcome. They used a technology unlike anything he has ever seen. Quote, "We were on guard, but suddenly all our radar systems shut down without any explanation." And the guard said the next thing we saw were drones, a lot of drones flying over our positions. We didn't know how to react. Moments later, a handful of helicopters, barely 8 by his count, deployed 20 troops into the area. They came up armed with something far more powerful than regular guns. They were shooting 300 rounds per minute. We were hundreds, but we had no chance. They were shooting with such precision and speed. At one point, they launched something, I don't know how to describe it. He said it was like a very intense sound wave. Suddenly, I felt like my head was exploding from the inside. So this is amazing. Hundreds of troops and against 20, and they were all disabled. White House Press Secretary Leavitt hailed the new debilitating U.S. weaponry. Nobody knows what this weapon is, but there's been a lot of experiments by a few countries, very few that I know of, with microwave-based weapons, and that's probably what it is. But this is the new age of warfare, on the ground-based warfare for sure. So we get into the investment of the week. First, disclaimers: Wall Street hackers is for entertainment only. There are no guarantees on, and these are only our opinions. Consult your financial advisor. So, still working on this weird environment right now. Okay, so this week we're going to go back to our long-term favorite. I've loved MPLX for so many years. Nick knows that. We've done the show for years. MPLX, we liked it 12, 20, 30, 40. Now it's up again. It was about 55 today. And I think it's still radically undervalued for generally, and it's our largest allocation. So MPLX is an MLP, which has special tax advantages for U.S. investors, a lot of tax advantages, which you can look up in terms of that, because it's take too much time for this show. But it's basically acts as a midstream energy infrastructure provider. And it provides logistics, and basically what it does a lot is pipelines. So it's shipping mainly oil, but also natural gas around the country. It's actually providing 10% of the natural gas in the United States, and it's 2/3 oil, which I kind of like too, and I'll explain why later that. So what I really like about MPLX is, one, it has an 8% yield. I mean, how many places can you get an 8% yield in what's probably the most safe, or one of the safest industries, which is energy? People are forecasting, I just read today, possible 25% increase in energy needs in the United States, based on the fact that data centers are going to use so much more. AI is going to use a lot of energy. So energy seems to be a pretty good place to be. It has an 8% tax advantage yield for U.S. investors. And the 8% yield is protected in many ways by a cash flow yield of 14%. What I do in all the investments is you look at cash flow, price over cash flow. So the price over cash flow is 7.18. You reverse it and you find out that they're making 14% cash flow yield, and that doesn't even count a lot of their growth investments. So there's a lot of growth and cash flow to support dividends and dividend increases. The dividend increases have been phenomenal for the company. We're talking about in recent years, 10%, 12% this year increase, and forecasts of those kind of dividend increases for the next few years. And then they say maybe they'll slow down. It's like you're talking about 8% yield, tax advantage for many U.S. investors, and growth on that. That is a very unusual combination. And I do like the fact that it's 2/3 oil, particularly, and it also has a very, very deep relationship with Marathon Petroleum. And some people view that as a negative because they might get bought out or something. I don't think so, because the MPLX is committed to not selling to Marathon Petroleum, and also their board members are doing very well with this tax structure they have now. So I don't think it'll ever be bought out. MLP investors should be aware of a few things. One, it is a little more complicated to do the K1, but any account can do it. Two, if you have a lot of it, you shouldn't have it in a qualified plan like an IRA or 401k, because there's something called UBTI, something you can also look up. It's a penalty for having a lot of this type of investment in an IRA, 401k. But a little bit is fine, and I have used them inside an IRA or that type of investment, but only small amounts. So I love MPLX as my largest allocation, and also I think it fits very nicely with West, which we're going to get into tomorrow. I have mentioned that in the future. I will have new picks, by the way, this year. In the next few weeks, I'll bring something up. But the point is, West is more natural gas oriented. I don't like the numbers quite as much as MPLX, but it may outperform. It has a 9% dividend yield. Again, the same tax advantages. And I like the fact that it's natural gas oriented, as just a hedge. And as I said, that will be next week's investment. So why President Trump or somebody in the White House should give me a call. They really should. I don't know why they haven't, and I don't know if they ever will. Besides my MBA, my law degree, my financial knowledge, I have a deep understanding of the healthcare industry, in which I've had an indirect work for over 20 years. Washington seems to have no idea. That includes the Republican senators, the Democratic senators, the House, and President of the United States. I hate to insult you all, but you have no idea. I keep hearing things. They say that is factually incorrect. They don't understand it. And this is why, if you go back, President Trump promised to get rid of Obamacare, quote, the Affordable Care Act, and he hasn't been able to do it. So a perfect example that nobody could refute is the fact that a lot of people are, including the senators, President Trump is saying, oh, we've got to go after the insurance companies. Well, guess what? A very credible study, and if it's not accurate, it's very close, shows that the profit margin in the insurance industry is 1.9%. So let's say you can squeeze 20% of that, or even a third, or even a half, which is unlikely because they need a lot of profit to administrate, whatever. And let me rephrase, they need a small profit margin to administrate. This is a very small profit margin compared to a lot of industries. So let's say you could get rid of half of it. You've solved 1% of the problem. This is minute, it's ridiculous, and it's focusing on the wrong problem. There are a lot of issues with medical care, but none of them, or some of them, relate to insurance, and the structure is crazy right now. But that's simple and irrefutable math. All right, panel quote of the week. Panel question of the week. I don't know why today. I'm just thrown off. Maybe because I don't like the environment in the background. I'll be working on that, at least a little. Anyway, let's bring Nick in. Nick. So we have a reasonable amount of time. I've been rushing because I didn't know how long we'd go. The question is, why do progressive Democrats keep taking the side of criminals and similar parties? Background. For years, many progressive Democrats, not all, but many, have been advocating for pro-criminal and, by definition, anti-victim reforms. we're talking about cashless bail, lower lower penalties for crimes, including many felonies that were reduced to misdemeanors, example in California, but many places. We're talking about prosecutors electing and pushing for prosecutors who won't prosecute a lot of crimes. And that is especially funded by George Soros. I don't know what he is thinking, but he loves to fund prosecutors. It could be that he wants to bring down the country to convert us to communism. I don't know, but it seems crazy. We're talking about denigrating the police, reducing the police budgets, replacing the police proposals and more with social workers in potentially dangerous situations. Then we look at the recent cause célèbres of the mainstream media, the more liberal one, which is a lot of it, and progressive one. They're worrying about the fate, a lot of focus on the fate of particularly one drug smuggler who might have gotten attacked too much. And in general, the fact that they are attacking drug smugglers. They're worrying about the capture of Nicolas Maduro, that it could be illegal. And they're worrying about a woman who was shot by an ICE agent, which on the face, okay, you could worry about some of these things. The problem is they're not mentioning or concerned. There's no concern of the following. One, the drug smugglers are bringing in drugs that are literally killing over 100,000 Americans a year and destroying that many more families. So they're worrying about the one drug smuggler who would kill, particularly in an aggressive way because he was out of the boat, and they're telling the story over and over again. But don't worry about the 100,000 and the other families who are destroyed by this. There's no concern that Nicolas Maduro destroyed the Venezuelan economy totally. It was very successful up to his takeover. The perfect mathematical fact is, in 2016, soon after Maduro took over, 75% of Venezuelans lost an average of 19 pounds each in a single year. And it wasn't due to Wegovy. It was due to starvation. So again, 75% of Venezuelans lost 19 pounds on average in 2016. No concern about that, but maybe they shouldn't have captured him. And not to mention he was a narco-terrorist. Then as for this story about the woman shot, first of all, what is factually undisputed is she defied orders to get out of the car. She had been blocking traffic and ICE agents for over 3 minutes, and then she was asked to get out of the car. And then she used the car, and this is disputed, but I watched the tape. I watched the videotape many times, and I'll tell you what's going on. That agent was hit by that car. So what you have many media outlets showing videos that don't show the actual story, but the ICE agents itself phone, and you can catch this but you have to struggle to get it sometimes on Google or whatever. But you can see the ICE agent. What happened is he told her to get out, and then he got in front of the car to stop it, and she gunned it. So this is on his own phone, and it's there. Now, you would say, well, that's just made up on conservative media. But CNN, I saw it on CNN's website. But then CNN said, he shouldn't have gotten in front of the car. Well, yeah, but he's an ICE agent, and he's trying to stop her from fleeing, and he told her to get out of the car. So then he shot her. But the other thing is, CNN says then you shouldn't have gotten out of the car, but the other ones are showing the other video that doesn't even show that he was in front of the car when she gunned it. So again, oh my gosh, it's like almost anybody who would watch the actual tape of this, if it was shown everyone would say, let's stop protesting this. And the footnote on this, by the way, is over 100 ICE agents have been attacked with cars. They're part of the, problem with, danger of being an ICE agent. And this particular ICE agent had been attacked by a car and dragged over 100 feet maybe 6 months ago. So maybe he was a little paranoid about it too when she's moving the car towards him. And, he obviously had fear he had been seriously injured in a prior attack. So, Nick, the question, why do progressive Democrats seem to be taking the side of criminals and the like?
Well, they're not. Here's how it works.
Okay.
If it was Obama or Biden, who one of them put a $25 million bounty on Maduro's head, if they were taking out Maduro, everything would be cool. The problem is it's Trump. And if Trump does it, it's wrong.
Right.
Okay. So it's just really simple. If it was a Republican group that was protesting and they got shot, that's fine. But if it's a Democrat group, it's not fine. So if the Republicans stormed the Capitol and they got shot, they all should go to jail. And if somebody incited them, which they purport that Trump did, which he did not, if you read the video, if you listen to the video carefully, then he should go to jail too. But if it was a Democrat, then it's okay. So it's not that they're totally for prosecuting crime as long as the criminal is a Republican. Okay. And I already got that after. So I don't even get this with this anymore. I'm done. I'm done talking to these people because I got it. All right.
Right. Yeah. No. Number one thing is politics and anti-Trump. And you know what? Just because you don't like Trump, and I have plenty of criticism of President Trump. Sorry, President Trump, but I believe probably 90% plus, 95% of his economic policies, particularly, are very positive for the country. He inherited a disaster situation from both President Biden and 50 years of people kicking the can down the road on the debt. The country and the world is in serious trouble in terms of the promises we've made to people. It's easy to say, okay, we'll cover your health care for life. Even if you're going to live to 90, we're going to cover, whatever, and we're going to cover your retirement. But, then when the actual numbers come in, it's like, wait a minute, are we going to print that much money? He inherited a terrible situation. On the other side, I don't agree with everything he said. Look, CNN criticized him. I watched him for half an hour, and they had one or two good points, but the rest of the show was just ridiculous. So, but you're right. The thing is, if it's Trump, it's bad. But the problem with that is, one, what the country needs is on both sides, but especially now the Democrats who have moved so far to the left and everything Trump does is wrong, is not a good logical philosophy. What we need is a dialogue for improvement, and the party should be working together to find the solution. But if one side is saying, no, whatever you say is wrong, there's no middle ground to that. It's like you just take the most extreme point as long as you can win political points. So it's not good for the country at all how far the Democratic Party has gone. And it's not everyone. I mean, you have the Pennsylvania senator being reasonable, but it's such a minority now. And many of the moderates, this has been going on for years, like Lieberman and so many others who are moderate, were just kicked out of the party. Now you have Pelosi dropping out because AOC is taking over. And these people are so ignorant on economics. Socialism has never worked, and yet they advocate socialism. You have a socialist the craziest policies in New York City and people they're putting in now. I hope the city doesn't clap, but this is bad for the country too. A thriving New York, a thriving world, and again, moderation would be a really good thing. Are the Republicans too far right? Definitely on some issues. Are they right on economics? Yes. And there's a lot of issues that most people agree with. Men and women's sports, most people agree they don't belong there. You could argue the other side, the other side, whatever it is, it's just too extreme. So hopefully everything will shake out in the end. It's kind of like an evolution, I guess. And so, you have things hitting together and then eventually, hopefully they smooth out. But it's been a rocky road. I blame the liberal media, by the way, as the last point, which you mentioned on many points. Over 90% of the media is liberal. And 92% of the reporting is just anti-Trump. It's like every story is anti-Trump, anti-Trump, anti-Trump. It's like, but then what if you're somebody who relies on this? And we're not just talking about CNN and MSNBC, which is totally psychotic on most issues, but even ABC, and which has been caught editing things dramatically. Even liberals are saying they destroyed their own ethical integrity, but by editing stories to a point where they were just untrue. And that was this year, multiple things, you can Google it. But the point is, the media they get good ratings. And let's say I'm a liberal, and I've seen this a lot from liberal people I know. We hate Fox, we hate, Newsmax, and we hate Fox Business. So they never look at it. So then, because the human nature is to look at self-affirming information. But personally, I look at everything because then I figure out the real story. Anyway, we're out of time. We hit 30 minutes almost exactly, Nick. Thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. We will be back Tuesday at 6 p.m. next week, Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for watching. As Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy. See you soon.
Bye-bye.